remembering those that survived the sinking of the RMS Titanic on April 15, 1912. The information provided was obtained and used from findagrave.com. This video contains passengers and employees with the last names starting with K. The remaining survivors will follow shortly. Miriam Sternin-Cantor, born 1887, in Russia. She boarded the Titanic along with her husband, and were second-class passengers. Miriam survived, but her husband perished in the sinking. She continued to work as a pharmacist, and never remarried. Other details about her later life remain incomplete. What is known is that for at least the last decade of her life, she was a patient in a psychiatric institution. Miriam appears on the 1940 and 1950 U.S. Census records as an inmate in the Rockland State Hospital, where she spent the remainder of her life. She passed away in 1950, at the age of 63. Her headstone states she was 59 years of age, however this is incorrect. Miriam is buried in New York. The next survivor is Einar Gervasius Karlsson, born 1890, in Sweden. His last name was spelled with a K, but he adopted the letter C at a later time. He served in the Swedish Army, attaining rank of corporal, before being discharged. In 1912, Einar decided to immigrate to the United States. Einar and his friend was scheduled to sail on the SS Adriatic, but due to the coal strike, they were booked on the Titanic as third-class passengers. On that fateful night, Einar stated that him and his friend hid in the shadows until sliding down a rope into Lifeboat 13. They were rescued by the Carpathia. Einar stayed in New York for a short time with his aunt and worked at a typewriter factory. Bothered by the noise, it reminded him of the Titanic sinking. Einar then traveled west as a hobo on a train. He worked in Minnesota and Colorado, and relocated in Nebraska, where he worked for a farmer. Einar gained his citizenship by enlisting in the U.S. Army. During World War I, Einar was the victim of a chemical attack, which left him with a permanent tremor in his hands. Einar was discharged as a corporal in 1919. After the war, he returned back to his farming job. In 1922, Einar was married, and they would have 4 children. In 1942, he was divorced, and then worked as a hotel desk clerk. Einar was haunted by the sinking of the Titanic and had nightmares. Every April, he would sleep in the barn, so he wouldn't disturb the family. Einar passed away in 1958, at the age of 67. He was buried in Nebraska. The next survivor is the Karun family. Father, Franz Karun. Daughter, Mana Karun Juven. Franz Karun, born 1872, in Slovenia. He boarded the Titanic with his daughter, and were third-class passengers. They both survived the sinking in Lifeboat 15. Franz passed away in 1934, at the age of 61. He was buried in Slovenia. Manka Karun Juven, born 1907, in Slovenia. She married Mr. Juven. Manka passed away in 1971, at the age of 63. She was buried in Slovenia. The next survivor is Friedrich Kasper, born 1868, in Germany. He was a fireman on the Titanic and survived. Friedrich passed away in 1942, at the age of 73. He was buried in New Jersey. The next survivor is Nora Agnes Keane, born 1866, in Ireland. She immigrated around 1880, when she was a very young woman, settling in Pennsylvania. Nora's occupation was listed as a housekeeper. She boarded the Titanic as a second-class passenger. Nora claimed to have been around 100 yards from the Titanic when it plunged. She was close enough to see people struggling in the water, while their cries carried across the ocean. Nora later ran a public house. She braved the ocean several times, visiting her mother in Ireland, who was sick. In 1919, Nora made another trip back to Ireland, with the intention of staying there for up to 6 years. It is not clear if Nora ever set foot on American soil again. Nora passed away in 1944, at the age of 78, due to complications from a broken leg. She is buried in Ireland. The next survivor is Percy Edward Keane, born 1881, in England. He survived the sinking of the Titanic in Lifeboat 15. Percy passed away in 1954, at the age of 73. He was cremated, and his ashes were scattered in an unmarked grave in England. The next survivor is Sister Patrick Joseph Kelly, born 1892, in Ireland. Her given birth name was Anna Catherine Kelly. She boarded the Titanic as a third-class passenger. Anna was traveling to Illinois to join her cousins. She was rescued in Lifeboat 16 after the berths vacated, and made room for her to enter. Anna was hospitalized in New York, and later traveled with a fellow survivor to Illinois. They were released from the hospital, wearing their nightgowns, old shoes someone had given them, and coats. Later she was haunted by the wild scenes on the Titanic, just before it went down. After the disaster, Anna became a nun, and upon ordination, she assumed the name Sister Patrick Joseph Kelly. She spent most of her life teaching in Illinois, but also spent some time in Michigan and Iowa. Sister Patrick retired to the Mother House in Michigan. She passed away in 1969 at the age of 78 due to hardening of the arteries. Sister Patrick is buried in Michigan. She is commemorated on a plaque located in Ireland. The next survivor is Mary Kelly Heslin, born 1890, in Ireland. She worked as a domestic and was hoping to find employment working for wealthy families in New York. Mary was also engaged to be married to Mr. Heslin. She boarded the Titanic as a third-class passenger. Mary was rescued in Lifeboat Collapsible D. Reaching New York, Mary was reunited with her fiancé. They were married in 1913 and would have 6 children. Mary remained in New York the rest of her life. She returned to Ireland for a visit in later years. Mary passed away at her home in 1950 at the age of 60. She is buried in New York. Graveside details state the following. Since 1891, only 6 of the 17 people buried in this grave are listed on the stone. Mary is not mentioned on the headstone due to a cemetery mistake. The cemetery engraved plot 21 instead of 12 on the present stone that was placed in 2007. The next survivor is Fanny Maria Tozer Kelly, born 1863, in England. She boarded the Titanic as a second-class passenger and survived. Fanny married Mr. Kelly, and they had 1 son. She passed away in 1920 at the age of 56. Fanny is buried somewhere in England. The next survivor is George Kemish, born 1889, in England. There is no information available on this individual. I am leaving this lily for you, you are not forgotten. The following information was obtained and used from the Encyclopedia Titanica website. In the 1911 census, George was a 21-year-old, unmarried seaman. George signed on to the Titanic as a fireman. His monthly income was £6 or $29.20. Following the collision, George was ordered down to the boiler rooms to draw the fires, a task he lamented was a difficult one. George then made his way to the boat deck and threw deck chairs over the side to act as ballast. He jumped from the starboard side with the intent of grabbing boat 9's falls and then lowering himself into the boat. George missed and dropped into the water, later being hauled aboard. After the disaster, George continued to serve at sea until the 1930s, and for a time, working as a fitter's mate. He corresponded with Walter Lord during the research for the book, A Night to Remember. In 1918, George married, and the couple would have 4 children. George passed away in 1966, at the age of 76. He is buried in England, with his wife and daughter. The next survivor is Private John Kennedy, born 1893, in Ireland. He boarded the Titanic, at the age of 21 years. John was a third-class passenger, and survived the sinking. He was at military camp, stationed in Georgia. His training proved brief. After just over 1 week, he fell ill. It was determined that John had contracted anthrax poisoning on his right cheek, transmitted from his shaving brush. John passed away at Camp Hancock, in 1918, at the age of 25. He was buried in New York, but not mentioned on the headstone. The next survivor is Marian Estelle Stauffer Kenyon, born 1871, in Iowa. On the 1880 census, Marian was living with her parents in Iowa. After the death of her father in 1888, Marian moved to Nebraska, with a friend, to work in a millinery shop. She then met Mr. Meinberg, and they married in 1898. They divorced a few years later. In 1902, Marian married Mr. Stewart, but once again, this marriage failed, and they soon divorced. Marian's next suitor was Mr. Kenyon. They were married, and settled in an apartment. They also had a holiday home in Connecticut. In 1912, the Kenyons had been on vacation, and returning back home, they boarded the Titanic, as first-class passengers. On the night of the sinking, the couple were preparing for bed. They were dressed and went on deck, where Marian escaped in Lifeboat 8. Marian asked her husband to follow her, but he refused to do so, preferring to remain, until all women and children were accounted for. Mr. Kenyon perished in the sinking. During the voyage, Marian was pregnant, but delivered a stillborn child, following the disaster. Marian moved to California. In 1916, she married Mr. Williams, a friend of her late husband. By the time the 1930 census, Marian reverted to the last name of Kenyon. Marian passed away in 1958, at the age of 87. She was cremated and her ashes were interred at a mausoleum in California, with her sister. The next survivor is the Kimball family. Husband, Edwin Nelson Kimball. Wife, Susan Gertrude Parsons Kimball. Edwin Nelson Kimball, born 1870, in Georgia. He was the president of the Hallett-Davis Piano Company, in Massachusetts. Edwin was returning from a business holiday, in Europe. He boarded the Titanic along with his wife, and were accompanied by friends. They all survived the sinking in Lifeboat 5. Edwin passed away in 1927, at the age of 57, due to pneumonia. Susan Gertrude Parsons Kimball, born 1866, in Massachusetts. She passed away in 1962, at the age of 95, due to cancer. They were buried together in Massachusetts. The next survivor is the Kink family. Husband, Anton Kink. Wife, Louise Heilmann Kropfel. Daughter, Louise Gretchen Kink Pope. Anton Kink, born 1883, in Austria. They boarded the Titanic as third-class passengers, and were accompanied by Anton's siblings. Louise and her daughter entered into Lifeboat 2, but Anton had to stay behind. The boat was about to be lowered, when Anton jumped into it. Anton's siblings perished in the sinking. In 1919, they were divorced. Anton passed away in 1959, at the age of 76. He was originally buried on the Zentralfriedhof. The headstone was moved first to the Steinfeld-Friedhof, then to Urnenfriedhof. Anton's remains were never moved from Zentralfriedhof. Louise Heilmann Kropfel, born 1886, in Germany. In 1908, for weeks after giving birth to her daughter, she married Mr. Kink. Louise never learned enough English to speak it very well. She excluded herself more and more. After divorcing Mr. Kink in 1919, Louise later married Mr. Kropfel. She never talked about her experience on that fateful night. If someone asked, Louise always said, "Why do you want to know that?" Anne would burst into tears. Her daughter took care of her until her death. Louise passed away in 1979 at the age of 93. She is buried in Wisconsin. Louise Gretchen King Pope, born 1908, in Switzerland. She was 4 years of age when she boarded the Titanic. In 1932, Louise married Mr. Pope, and they would have 4 children. They divorced shortly after the 4th child was born. Louise passed away in 1992, at the age of 84. She is buried next to her mother, in Wisconsin. The next survivor is George Knight, born 1865, in England. There is no information available on this individual. I am leaving this lily for you, you are not forgotten. The following information was obtained and used from the Encyclopedia Titanica website. George initially pursued a career as a cobbler, also known as a shoemaker. At the age of 18, George enlisted in the British Army in 1883. He was later transferred to the Army Medical Corps. George's medical records show that he was treated for various ailments, including catarrh, dysplasia, gonorrhea, and also had poor eyesight. In 1888, George was married. That same year, he was promoted to corporal. In 1890, the couple had a daughter. George was decorated with the King and Queen's South African Medal and became a staff sergeant before his discharge and pension in 1904. In 1905, the family moved to Southampton, where their daughter passed away just shy of her 15th birthday. In 1912, George signed on to the Titanic as a saloon steward. His monthly income was £3, or $14.60. George was believed to have been rescued in Lifeboat 13. He was not called into either the American or British inquiries into the disaster. George returned to England. Whether he resumed his career at sea is uncertain. In 1914, George re-enlisted with the British Army. In 1915, he was discharged due to a nervous condition. George passed away in 1945 at the age of 79. He is buried in England, in an unmarked grave. The next survivor is Thomas Knowles, born 1867, in England. He was a messman for the firemen on the Titanic. Thomas survived the sinking in Lifeboat C. He passed away in 1951, at the age of 83. Thomas is buried in England. The next survivor is Neshin Krikorian, born 1890, in Turkey. He boarded the Titanic and was a third-class passenger. Neshin jumped into Lifeboat 10. He developed pneumonia and stayed in hospitals in New York and Canada. Neshin passed away in 1978 at the age of 87. He is buried in Canada. The next survivor is Emily Kruchenwurm, born 1882, in Germany. She became a maid of a wealthy family. Emily booked her passage on the Titanic and was traveling to New York. She was rescued in Lifeboat 2. After the sinking, Emily traveled to Missouri. In 1913, she returned to Germany. Emily emigrated to California in 1916. She later married Mr. Worm. Emily passed away in 1971 at the age of 88 due to dropsy. She was cremated, and her ashes are interred at a columbarium in California. If you like this content, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to my channel at MeTime806. Thank you very much.